Hey guys, tonight we're going back way back. Picture this. The sun hasn't even cracked the horizon yet, but you're already awake, lying on a lumpy reed mat inside a narrow mudbrick room that smells like last night's stew and damp straw. Your bed is, generously speaking, a pile of textiles someone gave up on weaving. You blink up at the low ceiling and try not to inhale too deeply. Because yes, that's a scorpion on the wall again. This is ancient Mesopotamia, and congratulations, you've survived one whole sleep. Now comes the hard part. You have no shoes, no social standing, and exactly zero idea what the gods have in store for you. Outside, a temple bell made of hammered bronze gongs out a dull, rattling note. It's your call to action, or, in your case, your call to trudge awkwardly across a sun-baked courtyard while trying not to stub your toe on a rogue shard of pottery. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You emerge into a soft, dusty dawn. The city is already stirring. This one Sumerian, maybe Uruk or Lagash, though honestly it doesn't make much difference. The architecture is square, the air smells like wet clay, and your neighbor is already arguing with his ox. The Ziggurat looms above everything like a tiered wedding cake made of despair, casting long shadows over alleyways and sacrificial goats. People are surprisingly busy for a civilization still figuring out umbrellas. You hear the thud of pestles, the squeaky creak of donkey carts, and someone yelling about fish prices. There's not much privacy. Families spill out of open doorways, half-dressed, half-conscious, and all cranky. You, however, are expected to show up clean, modestly robed, and ready for, well, whatever the high priest decides today's celestial mood requires. Your tunic itches. It was woven by a cousin you barely like, from flax grown in a patch of dirt that was probably blessed by a priest and urinated on by a cow. Both of those things are equally likely. There are no mirrors, of course, so you check your reflection in a rain barrel and are promptly reminded that hygiene is less a concept and more of a suggestion. You shuffle through narrow alleys, trying to avoid eye contact with a woman who's yelling about cursed bread. The streets are paved with baked clay bricks, some of which are dislodged, exposing moist earth that squishes underfoot. You step around it, miss slightly, and land your heels squarely in something you hope came from a goat. Just ahead, a man wearing an elaborate beard and very little else stands outside a small shrine, burning something that smells like moss, regret, and burnt onions. He waves you over with a smile that suggests this is your fault. You're late, he says, not looking up from his bundle of smoking reeds. The gods have been waiting. Well, that's not intimidating at all. You're ushered up the ziggurat, steps, dozens of them, each slightly different in size because architectural standardization is still a few centuries away. At the top, wind gusts through the narrow archways and tosses your hair around like it's trying to start a fashion movement. From this height, the city looks like a child's sandcastle, slowly melting under a sky already turning white with heat. The ritual involves standing in the direction of the sunrise, bowing, and reciting a hymn about Enlil, god of wind, who may or may not have caused your friend's house to collapse last week. The priest chants melodically while you repeat after him, trying not to mispronounce anything that might invoke divine frogs. Historians still argue whether these dawn rituals were purely symbolic or actively tied to local agricultural calendars, but you're too busy trying not to sneeze into a ceremonial basin. One thing is clear, the gods are exhausting before breakfast. By the time the sun crests the eastern wall, you're already sweating, your back aches from all the bowing, and the reed mat on your sandals starting to unravel. As you're dismissed, the priest hands you a folded scrap of bark. Your next assignment. You unfold it and sigh. You've been volunteered for canal maintenance. This day just keeps getting better. You descend the ziggurat stairs slower this time, your legs feeling every inch of Sumerian elevation, and try to mentally prepare yourself for what lies ahead. You pass a group of bows chasing a particularly fat duck, two older women trading insults over a cracked pot, and a very relaxed goat chewing on a legal document someone clearly gave up on. No one offers you sympathy. The city smells like damp earth, fermented barley, and heat stroke. But if you pause for just a moment If you stand still at the edge of a temple plaza and let the breeze roll in from the distant floodplains, you'll hear the gentle hum of a civilization trying very, very hard to hold it together with string, clay, and divine guilt. You're going to be late for your canal shift again. And the supervisor is known for throwing small rocks at people who show up late. You make your way to the canal zone with all the enthusiasm of a sack of damp lentils. The sun has officially risen, and the cool breeze you were enjoying 30 seconds ago has vanished, replaced by the kind of dry heat that feels like being licked by an angry brick oven. Your destination lies on the city's edge, a place where the orderly geometry of mud-brick homes gives way to lumpy embankments, crooked irrigation ditches, and a suspiciously aggressive population of frogs. The canal is not the scenic waterway you might imagine. There are no swans, no lily. Just brown, slow-moving sludge framed by clumps of reeds and one very dead fish that no one seems inclined to move. You join a group of other citizens, most of them barefoot, shirtless, and already sunburned, armed with an assortment of wooden shovels, bent bronze scoops, and pure bitterness. Stock canal maintenance in Mesopotamia is less a job and more a grim social necessity. These canals are the arteries of the region, feeding barley fields, date palms, and occasionally hydrating goats that wander to close. If they clog with silt or worse, garbage, the whole system collapses, crops die, and someone has to explain the failure to the local priest king, who will not take it well. Your task? Remove the accumulated muck, reshape the embankments, and make it all flow like a child's dream of symmetry, which, given the tools and the workforce, is an ambitious fantasy. You take your place beside a grizzled man who smells like onion paste and defeat. He grunts a greeting and hands you a woven reed basket already filled with mud. You accept it, because refusal is not part of the job description, and tip it into the nearby pile, which immediately collapses back into the canal with a soggy sigh. Again, says the man. And watch for leeches. Ah, right, leeches. You gingerly reach into the canal with your scoop and immediately regret it. The mud is warm, not just sun-warmed, body temperature warm. The kind of warm that suggests something biological has happened in there and continues to happen. You pull up a scoopful and something long, slimy, and far too lively wiggles out between your fingers. You yelp. The man laughs. First time, he asks. Also last, you mutter. The sun climbs higher. You sweat through your tunic, and the back of your neck starts to resemble scorched parchment. Around you, people work in silence, broken only by the occasional shout, splash, or existential groan. One teenager sings a work song about drowning in barley beer. It's weirdly catchy. Your foot slips, and suddenly you're thigh-deep in the canal. Everyone looks over. No one offers help. The man beside you simply nods, as if to say, yes, this is your life now. You haul yourself out with a heroic squelch, missing one sandal and gaining several ounces of mystery sediment. A woman across the canal points and laughs. She's wearing a wide-brimmed hat made of straw and bad intentions. You try to muster a witty comeback but sneeze instead, launching a glob of mud onto your own shoulder. You'll be lucky if your pry ever dries. Somewhere in the distance, a horn sounds. Break time. The man beside you doesn't move. Not for us, he mutters. That's for the temple workers, right? The elite class who mostly move scrolls around and argue about lunar calendars while sitting on polished benches under shade awnings. You, on the other hand, are one missed shift away from having your name scratched off the communal bread list. Historians still argue whether canal maintenance was purely civic duty or enforced as a punishment for tax evasion. Either way, it's clear that no one is here by choice. You steal a moment to sit under a gnarled tamarisk tree, which offers exactly 2 leaves worth of shade. A man nearby eats a date and offers you the pit. For good luck, he says. You thank him and pocket it, because why not? Your pockets are already full of mud and regret. The afternoon stretches on like a Mesopotamian tax code. You dig, scoop, and occasionally stop to slap flies away from your ears. A goat wanders by and poops in the freshly cleared channel. You sigh. By late morning, your hands are blistered, your shoulders ache, and your lower back is staging a rebellion. A supervisor strides by, arms crossed, eyes squinting. His tunic is slightly cleaner than everyone else's, which means he's either well-respected or simply good at avoiding work. He pauses beside you. This mud is not symmetrical, he says, pointing to the embankment. You stare at it. It's mud. It's roughly embankment-shaped. You resist the urge to throw a leech at him. Fix it, he adds, and strolls off toward the shade, where someone is boiling lentils and complaining about omens. You fix the mud. Eventually, a thin shadow stretches across your work area. You look up barely. It's the man from before, the one who smells like onions and bad decisions. He nods again, wordlessly, and tosses you half of his barley cake. It's hard, dry, and shaped like a collapsed pyramid, but it's food. Better than nothing, he says, chewing. You nod, chewing carefully to avoid dental emergencies. Mesopotamian dentistry is just someone poking your gums with a hot stick. The sky begins to glow white-blue, and the sound of distant drum signals that it's nearly midday. You wipe your face with the corner of your tunic, which does nothing but redistribute grime, and start heading back toward the city proper. As you trudge along the canal, you spot a small child herding ducks with a stick, singing something about fish gods and burning rain. A nearby field shimmers under the heat, and somewhere a priest is probably blaming today's humidity on a star god's mood swing. Welcome to Mesopotamia. You're filthy, exhausted, and slightly bleeding from your thumb. Only 11 hours left in the day. You're back in the city proper, if that term can apply to a maze of uneven alleys, wheezing donkeys, and buildings that lean like they're gossiping about you. Your tunic is crusted with canal silt, one sandal is still waterlogged, and you smell like wet barley left in the sun. You head toward a cluster of open courtyards where you've been told to report for community obligations, which is ancient Mesopotamian for we found something awful for you to do that benefits someone richer. You round the corner and are immediately shouted at by a man in a tall woolen hat and a robe that looks like it's never seen a ditch. He waves a clay token at you and gestures toward the embankment where several workers are already hacking at a dried-out channel with sharpened wooden spades. Public works, again. Apparently, the canal you just spent your morning cleaning feeds into this main distributary, which has been backed up for days thanks to a blockage involving papyrus, a broken cart wheel, and something the foreman only refers to as that eel incident. You are handed a shovel-like thing or a plank with aspirations and shown where to dig. A scribal apprentice sits nearby with a tally stick and a perpetually judgmental expression, carefully tracking who does how much work and who slacks off. You know because you just coughed. And he raised an eyebrow. You're in for another few hours of shoveling, except this time, the earth is baked nearly solid. Your arms buzz with fatigue, and your shoulders crackle like old parchment every time you move. You scrape at the sun-hardened silt, creating dust clouds that sting your eyes and cling to the sweat drying on your neck. And it's not just the labor that's rough. It's the politics. Mesopotamian public work crews are a strange stew of classes. There's you, the expendable, no-status drifter. A few unfortunate craftsmen who drew bad lots. A merchant's son pretending to faint every 15 minutes. And at least one guy who's clearly here because someone's goat ended up mysteriously pregnant and the city court needed to balance the scales. No one talks much. Too hot, too bitter, too much risk of saying something insulting and accidentally triggering a trial by ordeal. You just keep digging and praying to whichever local deity handles wrist tendons. A man beside you lets out a long, theatrical sigh. You know, he says, in a voice hoarse with dust, in Lagash they have actual copper tools. You nod, because this is probably a lie but it's nice to imagine. Another worker snorts. And in Nippur, the water flows uphill. In dreams, jokes like this are all you have. That, and the vague hope of shade before your ears, turn into cooked lentil flaps. Historians still argue whether this labor rotation system was truly equitable or skewed heavily in favor of temple elites who just happened to always be in prayer during the hardest assignments. Judging by the number of empty benches in a shady portico across the street, you have a theory. By the time someone calls a halt, you're so caked in dust that your own mother wouldn't recognize you if you had one here. A supervisor hands out a single handful of damp millet to share among for workers. You lick your fingers to make the grain stick, which is both effective and deeply depressing, but lunch or what passes for it brings a change of pace. You're escorted to a nearby courtyard where a tax scribe is doing the rounds. You didn't think this applied to you after all. You own exactly one tunic and half a sandal, but here you are, standing in line behind a man holding a squawking chicken and a woman whose arms are full of onions. The tax collectors are equal opportunity terror sites when it's your turn. A bald man with the energy of a disappointed librarian looks up from his clay tablet and sniffs. Name, he asks. You give the name you've been using this week, something generic, safe, unlikely to be associated with any debts, he grunts. Do you own any livestock? You shake your head. Barley? You shrug. A little. Somewhere. Then, we'll take a labor token, he says, pulling out a stylus with the grim flair of someone about to ruin your afternoon. He presses it into a soft clay tag and hands it to you. It says you owe an extra day of irrigation duty next moon cycle. You want to protest, but a guard 2 feet away has a club made of polished wood and a very bored expression. You nod and pocket the tag. Behind you, a man is arguing that his goat is not taxable because it's possessed. The scribe rolls his eyes so hard they might sprain. Possessed goats are taxed double, he mutters. You step away before someone accuses your sandal of heresy. Taxation in Mesopotamia is famously creative. While standard measures included barley, fish, wool, and labor, more unusual items like bird feathers or love poems have appeared in recovered tablets. Some researchers even found a record of a man who paid his land lease with a set of exceptionally shaped turnips. The lie behind you grows louder. Someone's fainted. Someone else is trying to trade a clay pot for a tax exemption. You head for the edge of the square and find a patch of cracked shade under an awning stitched from woven reeds. You sit. You breathe. You count your remaining possessions. 1 tunic, 1 sandal, a labor tag, a dry barley crumb, and the date pit someone gave you earlier. You wonder if planting it would get you out of taxes next year. You doubt it. As the afternoon sun begins to press downward, you know one thing for certain. You're going to need better lies, stronger sandals, and a new plan for dinner. Because you may have escaped the shovel for now, but you're not done with this day, not even close. Your next stop is the marketplace, not because you want to shop, heavens no. You have nothing to trade unless someone's looking for a sunburned canal worker with a mildly haunted expression and 1 leech bite, but because that's where the city pulses in the afternoon heat. And if you linger anywhere else, someone might assign you another job involving buckets and spiritual muck, which is not a metaphor. You step into the bazaar and are hit with a barrage of sensory overload. Imagine someone shouting about lentils in your left ear, a goat sneezing in your right, and the unmistakable aroma of pickled fish hitting your nose square on. Welcome. Stalls made of palm branch mats and dusty wool line the cramped paths. Women with loud voices and sharper elbows elbow their way through throngs. Babies tied to backs, baskets balanced on heads. Men hold up slabs of dried meat or scoops of shimmering incense resin, waving them under your face with hopeful eyebrows. You mumble something about just browsing and keep moving. You're instantly lost. To your left, someone is auctioning off a broken lyre. To your right, a man swears on the god Nana that his figs are only half infested. You nearly trip over a small child attempting to sell a pigeon with 1 wing. You think you hear someone whispering about 2-for-1 eels, and through it all, the universal hum of barter. No coins here, just endless haggling. You overhear a debate about whether a jug of beer is worth 4 onions or 5. Another involves a spirited argument over whether a goat's left hoof is luckier than its right. You suspect no one knows the correct prices, everyone's just improvising loudly. Until someone gives up, you stop at a vendor with a decent display of dry dates. You're not really hungry, but a snack might distract you from the ache in your legs. The man behind the table has a surprisingly luxurious beard and a knowing smile. You look like someone in need of a soft fruit, he says. You nod, cautiously. 3-for-1 bracelet, he offers. You don't have a bracelet. How about this clay token? You ask, holding up your labor tag. He leans forward, squinting. That's a canal token, he says with disdain. Good for sore backs and blisters, not dates. You end up trading the dry barley crumb from earlier and tossing in a compliment about his beard. He accepts. You chew your prize slowly. It tastes like dust, sugar, and mild self-loathing. Still better than canal water. You pass a stall selling Potter wonky bowls, lopsided jugs, and something that looks like an experimental cup. The potter, a woman with calloused hands and a humorless face, stares at you. You make the mistake of trying to flirt. Nice. Rims on those bowls, you say. She glares. You panic and try again. Did it hurt when you fell from the ziggurat? She narrows her eyes. Are you calling me clumsy or divine? You back away. Rapidly. Flirting in Mesopotamia is a minefield. A badly phrased metaphor could turn romantic overture into a curse accusation. Historians still debate the boundaries of acceptable innuendo in Sumerian courtship rituals, but based on your performance, it's best to leave it to the professionals. You duck behind a pile of reed mats and try to blend in with a group of traveling traders. One of them offers you a lizard on a stick, roasted, possibly. You decline. Next, you stumble upon the fish section. You did not want to find the fish section. The air here is thick, oily, and vaguely accusatory. Rows of glistening, glassy eye. Fish stare at you from woven trays. A cat jumps out of nowhere, steals a sardine, and vanishes like a whiskered ghost. No one reacts. This is the natural order. A vendor calls out, fresh from the river. Mostly dead today. You nod politely and retreat. As you maneuver through the crowd, you nearly collide with a priest in a bright embroidered robe. He's being carried in a litter shaded by a linen canopy. His attendants clear the way with practiced coughs, and you just barely dodge stepping on his trailing sash. That would have been inconvenient. You mumble an apology to the air. Someone slaps a flyer well, a chunk of carved clay into your hand. It's an advertisement for a local diviner who claims he can read dreams, weather patterns, and possibly foot fungus. The consultation fee is a bag of lentils or an emotionally resonant poem. You tuck it into your tunic. You never know. Suddenly, a loud commotion breaks out near the southern corner of the square. Two men are arguing over a goat, a real goat, currently standing between them and chewing on someone's sandal. Each claims ownership. Each has a clay tablet. Each tablet says something different. Within seconds, the goat has been hoisted into someone's arms, and the crowd begins shouting suggestions, legal interpretations, and creative insults. A few people start taking baits. You stand back and watch. As a local court clerk is summoned, he arrives with a bored expression and a stick of chalk. He marks the goat's horns, mutters something about property rights under Enlil, and declares a temporary seizure until the matter can be judged by the city elders. The goat poops in protest. As the crowd disperses, you make your escape, clutching your stomach not from hunger, but from the lingering tension of being an unpaid bystander in a world that loves dragging people into legal drama. Your ears ring with the buzz of the market. You're still broke, still sweaty, still unsure where to go next. But at least you have one date left in your pocket and a story about a goat that almost became yours. Small victories. You shuffle away from the marketplace, limbs aching, teeth sticky with the last remains of that very questionable date, when a deep, rhythmic clang interrupts your thoughts. It echoes from the temple district, the unmistakable sound of a bronze gong being struck with increasing urgency. It's not a fire. It's not an invasion. No. It's something much worse, a religious procession. You know the drill. Everyone not actively dying is expected to attend. And given your luck today, you'll probably end up near the front, holding something smelly and highly flammable. You consider faking a twisted ankle, but then remember that Mesopotamian medicine includes procedures involving hot sticks and suspicious chanting. You decide to limp along quietly instead. The temple courtyard is already filling with people, some reverent, some bored, all sweaty. At the center, priests in elaborate robes made from layered wool and what might be dyed goat hair are arranging offerings, baskets of barley, amphorae of beer, to live pigeons, and a small idol decorated with lapis lazuli eyes. The idol stares into your soul and offers zero encouragement. You're handed a bundle of reeds soaked in aromatic oil and told to follow the chant leader in a spiral pattern around the altar. You hold it like it might explode, which, given your proximity to the temple fire, isn't entirely out of the question. The chant begins. It's slow, nasal, and repetitive. You try to follow along, but your Akkadian pronunciation leaves something to be desired. You hope the gods are in a forgiving mood today. 3 circuits into the spiral, a priest begins tossing handfuls of flour into the air like divine seasoning. The pigeons coo in a way that suggests skepticism. Someone behind you sneezes directly onto your shoulder. You offer your suffering to the gods. Historians still argue whether these rituals were genuinely believed to influence the gods or simply functioned as theatrical expressions of communal identity. Standing here with your back sweating through your tunic and your fingers burning from the oily reed torch, you lean toward both and neither. Just when you think things are wrapping up, the high priest steps forward and begins a dramatic sermon about the importance of rain, obedience, and not marrying your cousin's daughter's sister. It lasts 45 minutes. You are fairly certain you briefly passed out standing up. At one point, someone faints from heat stroke. No one panics, and acolyte simply drags them to a shady spot, pours water over their face, and leaves a small offering beside them, just in case they've been spiritually repossessed. Finally, the ceremony ends. Or at least you think it ends. People start dispersing. A few remain to chant a little longer, possibly just to avoid returning to their day jobs. You extinguish your reeds, which have now melted into a clump of smoking black threads, and wander toward the edge of the temple district. Before you can escape, a junior priest grabs your elbow and smiles, like he's about to sell you something you didn't ask for. "We need someone to carry this up to the Ziggurat," he says, shoving a basket into your hands. It's full of moldy grain and an odd-smelling clay figurine. You climb the steps again. That's twice in one day, if you're counting, and your knees certainly are. At the top, another priest takes the offering and nods in approval. "Blessed be your feet," he says solemnly. You want to bless his face with your sandal, but instead you nod and turn around to descend carefully. You've seen what happens when someone trips on these stairs. There was a whole ballad about it. Something involving a priest, a duck, and a broken sacred jar. As you reach the bottom, you're pulled aside by a group of temple attendants. They're arguing over a broken incense tray and whether it's a sign of divine displeasure or just poor craftsmanship. You're asked to weigh in. For some reason, you blink. "Looks like it fell," you say. A long silence follows. Then one nods and says, "He's right, divine minds, classic." You're released. You retreat behind a nearby storage hut, where you collapse onto a cool stone slab and watch ants march across the floor like they've got better life plans than you. Someone nearby is whispering a prayer. You can make out the words, but the tone is desperate and the cadence familiar to many syllables for what should be a simple request. Probably love, or crop insurance. Overhead, the sky is an oppressive, blinding white. There are no clouds, just sun, sky, and the ever-lurking suspicion that the gods are watching, bored, and occasionally poking things for amusement. As you rest, you spot an older man lighting a clay lamp at a side altar. He moves slowly, reverently. You recognize him, a former reed cutter turned part-time astrologer. He claimed last week that the moon's reflection in a puddle predicted an outbreak of weevil infestations. He was somehow correct. He catches your eye and says, "Have you offended Marduk today?" You open your mouth, then close it. "Probably," he nods. "That'll do it." Before you can respond, a bell rings. Another summons. This one sounds less urgent, more bureaucratic. You're informed you're expected to appear before a scribe for recording purposes. You're not sure what that means, but based on your day so far, it probably ends with another clay token and a sore back. As you stand, the idol from earlier catches your eye again. Its expression hasn't changed, but you swear it knows what kind of day you're having, and it's amused. You're escorted, herded into the scribe's chamber by a boy no older than 12 who carries more authority in his rolled-up scroll than you do in your entire sunburnt body. He doesn't speak as he leads you through a doorway into a dim mudbrick room lit by a single oil lamp, and the soul-crushing knowledge that this will take a while. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax, old parchment, and something vaguely like boiled turnip. Scroll racks line the walls, their clay contents tagged and organized with obsessive precision. You spot one labeled goats, disputes of and another ominously titled deaths, suspicious and otherwise. At the far end of the room sits a teenager, maybe 17, on a low stool, hunched over a clay tablet. He has ink smudges on his forehead, a stylus tucked behind his ear, and the facial expression of someone who's just been asked to work through lunch. "This is your scribe." He glances up and doesn't bother hiding his disappointment. "Name?" he asks. Already scribbling, you give it. He spells it phonetically, badly, then mutters something about how people should just number themselves. You try to sit. He gestures for you to stand. Apparently, clay protocol doesn't allow for the comfort of those being documented. So, he continues, licking the tip of his stylus. "It says here you were seen near a broken offering tray and heard muttering something about the gods." You blink. "I said it looked like it fell." He squints. "And how exactly did it fall?" You point vaguely at gravity. "It slumped." He makes a disgusted sound, as if you've personally offended literacy. The next 10 minutes are a flurry of oddly specific questions. Did you use the word crack or fracture? Was your left hand visible? Was there any sign of sacrificial oil on your tunic at the time? You try to answer truthfully, but soon realize the truth is simply not built to navigate Mesopotamian bureaucracy. He sighs, will record it as unintended. Ritual clumsiness, that's under subcategory 1 to see. You'll be fine. For what? You ask. For documentation time and general misfortune. He begins etching your details into a new clay tablet. The scratching nose fills the room, broken only by your soft, inward scream. Your punishment, a day of community service at the temple school. You consider pleading for exile, but remember that exile in Mesopotamia mostly means getting eaten by wolves, or worse, taxes in another city. Next, the scribe calls, already dismissing you. As you step outside, blinking in the brightness, you hear a familiar sound, low chanting, the occasional splutter of children trying not to fall asleep, and the dreaded scrape of styluses, wet clay. You are not free. You've been sentenced to learning. You arrive at the temple school, which is housed in a low, square building near the canal. The walls are decorated with faded frescoes of heroic scribes battling more clay tablets. Inside, rows of children sit cross-legged in front of reed mats, each with a fresh tablet and a deeply bored expression. An older man, the instructor, nods at you. Take a seat, he says, then smirks. New student, you sit on a mat that feels like it hasn't been cleaned since the invention of agriculture. A bow beside you offers a sympathetic grimace and whispers, hope you know your wedges. You do not. The instructor begins reciting symbols. He calls out things like angle, wedge, double mark, and the class responds in a sleepy drone. While pressing styluses into clay, you follow along, tentatively poking at your tablet like it might yell back. After 5 minutes, your symbols look less like cuneiform and more like a pictographic account of a bird drowning. The instructor strolls by, examines your work, and lets out a no somewhere between a sigh and a sneeze. Maybe stick to irrigation, he mutters. Historians still argue whether temple schools were open to the public or only elites, but one thing's clear, the curriculum was merciless. You're expected to memorize hundreds of symbols, distinguish between nearly identical marks, and remember which gods prefer which wedge patterns. And you thought modern cursive was bad. The bow beside you leans over and says, you can cheat if you write really small. You thank him and promptly drop your stylus into your lap, leaving a clay stain shaped like Mesopotamian regret. Eventually, the lesson shifts to poetry. The instructor recites something about the moon goddess and to turnips in love. It's not terrible. In fact, it's oddly moving. You feel your eyelids drooping, the rhythmic chanting, the soft scrape of clay, the background buzz of sleepy children. It's lulling. You wake up when your forehead hits your tablet. There's now a line down your nose, etched forever into your dignity. The instructor sends you to the corner to copy 5 lines of praise to the great river. As punishment, you sit beside a girl who somehow carved a fully detailed duck into her tablet and is now trying to make it dance. You copy your lines, badly. Your hands cramp. Your back protests. You never thought you'd miss being up to your knees in canal muck, but here you are, fantasizing about shovels, after what feels like the longest afternoon of your life. The instructor finally says, enough. He claps his hands. The students scatter. You're told your service is complete. You leave your clay tablet behind, possibly to be mocked by future archaeologists. As you step outside, the sun is beginning to dip. The breeze returns, slightly cooler. Now, as if the gods are finally done toying with you for the day, but there's still dinner to figure out, and beds aren't guaranteed in this town. The good news, it's evening now, and that means the day's relentless obligations are finally tapering off. The bad news, you're starving. You haven't had a full meal since that humble handful of barley dust someone graciously mistook for lunch. And unless you plan on knowing on your own sand or what's left of it, you're going to have to scrounge up something edible fast. So you follow your nose. Literally, there's a smell on the wind now, something enticing. Charred onions, spiced lentils, and the unmistakable aroma of slightly singed meat. You drift toward it like a moth to a barley-flavored flame. Down a winding alley you go, past stray dogs, a man performing questionable divination, using fish bones, and a woman yelling at a goat with deep personal conviction. You emerge into a communal courtyard where families are beginning to cook their suppers over clay stoves and portable fire pits. The scene is rustic romantic, even if you ignore the constant threat of scorpions and the very real possibility that any given dish contains river snails. A cheerful old man with eyebrows like broom bristles beckons you over. New face, he asks. You look hungry. You smell hungry. You nod. Words take too much energy at this point. He points to a pot bubbling on a 3-stone hearth. Lamb stew. Might be actual lamb this time. You smile faintly. What's the catch? He chuckles. Just help me carry a jar from the storeroom. My back's as twisted as a floodplain. Seems fair. You follow him into a low storage room, lined with amphorae, baskets, and the kind of dank hair that smells like pickled turnips and ancient disappointment. You host a hefty jug of beer. Yes, beer was food back then, and bring it back without dropping it. The old man is thrilled. Eat, he says, handing you a cracked bowl of stew, still steaming. It tastes like heaven filtered through a goat, which, honestly, is high praise. You sit on a sun-warmed brick, spooning up mouthfuls of vegetables and some protein you decide not to identify too closely. Around you, others laugh, chat, and sip thick, yeasty beer from communal jugs. It's a rare moment of peace. Of course, nothing in Mesopotamia stays peaceful for long. Across the courtyard, a pair of women begin arguing over who last borrowed whose grindstone. The exchange escalates quickly, with hand gestures, dramatic appeals to obscure family history, and at least one accusation involving theft during a lunar eclipse. Someone murmurs, "Better go get a mediator." You're about to suggest minding your own business, but unfortunately, the cheerful old man from earlier claps you on the back and says, "You're new. That means neutral. Go calm them down." Brilliant. You walk over slowly, hoping one of them gets bored or forgets what the argument was about. No such luck. They're in full performance mode now, drawing a crowd and throwing wild insults like your breath never rises. And you wash your tunic with ditch water. You raise both hands in what you hope is a universal sign of "please don't stab me with a fish bone. Maybe we should all sit down," you offer. "Have some stew." The taller of the two women narrows her eyes. You siding with her? "No." You reply quickly. "I'm siding with digestion." She blinks, then snorts, then miraculously laughs. Historians still argue whether community feuds like these were resolved through formal councils or just whoever had the loudest grandmother. Tonight, it seems, stew and bad jokes do the trick. The crowd disperses. The women go back to their respective fire pits, muttering but no longer throwing shade at each other's domestic skills. You breathe. You survive. Later, bellies full and the air cooling slightly, people begin to sprawl on reed mats and stone benches. Someone plucks at a lyre. A child tries to recite a tale about Enki and the talking fish but forgets the ending. No one minds. The mood is soft, easy. Even the mosquitoes seem too lazy to bite. A neighbor offers you a place by the wall to rest for the night. It's not a bed, it's not even a mat, but it's flat, and the bricks are still warm from the sun. You lie down and look up. The stars here don't twinkle, they stare. Bold, steady, and ancient. You recognize none of the constellations, but that doesn't matter. They feel solid, watchful, and slightly amused by your existence. Someone nearby is snoring. Someone else is quietly humming a lullaby. The scent of burnt lentils hangs in the air like incense. You close your eyes, just as sleep begins to tug at you. A man stumbles into the courtyard muttering about a stolen goat. You groan. Not again. You're roused far too early by the unmistakable sounds of frantic goat-related litigation. Again. The man from last night is back, wild-eyed, barefoot, and cradling a clay tablet like it's a newborn. "This," he shouts, waving it overhead, "proves my claim." No one looks particularly impressed. A neighbor groans from under a woven blanket. The old man with the stew throws a pebble in the general direction of the nose. "Settle it after dawn, goat man," someone mumbles, but no, the goat man is not deterred. He points an accusing finger at a nearby boy who looks half asleep and entirely confused. He borrowed it to mow his cousin's reeds, and now it's missing. The boy rubs his eyes. "I borrowed your basket, not your goat, already." You sense this is going to require a judge. So begins your unexpected journey into Mesopotamian courtroom drama. You shuffle toward the town square alongside a growing crowd of reluctant witnesses and curious neighbors. The sun is barely peeking over the rooftops. The air still clings to a hint of coolness, and someone is already trying to sell roasted locusts on a stick. At the center of the square stands a raised platform, with an intricately carved chair that counts as a throne only because someone decided it should. This is where the city's appointed judge, part priest, part scribe, part extremely tired uncle, presides over legal matters both grand and petty. Today, it's goat business. The judge arrives draped in dusty linen, carrying a stylus tucked into his sash and a jug of what is definitely not water. He takes a seat, yawns, and asks, "Which goat is this again?" The goat man launches into a convoluted tale involving property lines, a fishing debt, a festival, and oddly a dream about onions. The beau retorts that the goat in question wasn't his to borrow, and besides, it had a limp and a bad attitude. You're asked to testify. Why? You were asleep the whole time, but proximity makes you a witness in Mesopotamia. You step forward, clear your throat, and say, "I saw the goat yesterday. It looked ... like a goat." Everyone nods solemnly. This seems to satisfy the judge, who bangs a stick on the ground and declares, "Trial postponed. The goat shall be held in the temple pen until further omens are observed." A scribe dutifully records this ruling, etching the words into clay with practiced flicks of the wrist. You can't help but glance at the growing pile of legal tablets nearby. There's one that literally says, "Dispute over a broken broom, second offense." Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian courts leaned more on precedent or divine inspiration. Based on what you just witnessed, it's a hearty mix of both with a generous helping of goat-based guesswork. As the crowd begins to dissipate, a temple attendant approaches you. "You gave clear testimony," he says. "We need you to help with record storage. You've made a mistake." He leads you to the archive chambers, a low-ceilinged hall lined with shelves groaning under the weight of thousands of clay tablets. It's musty, dim, and filled with the soft echo of distant scribbling. The only source of airflow is a cracked window guarded by a bird that might be alive but is certainly judging you. Your task. Organize. You stare at the nearest shelf, where tablets are tagged with things like accounts, beer rations, palace roof, divinations, based on goat entrails, and complaints. Loud neighbors' minor curses. You begin sorting, slowly and poorly. The weight of the tablets surprises you, each one heavy with the hopes, debts, and minor grievances of someone who lived, sweated, and probably got in trouble for losing a goat. You find one titled "Recipe: Onion Paste for Marital Harmony." You consider pocketing it. Then, of course, you drop a tablet. It shatters. Everyone stops and turns. The silence is thick. A scribe nearby sighs and mutters. Again, you're told to leave. You escape the archive with clay dust on your hands and humiliation in your sandals. You wander aimlessly until you find a shady wall and lean against it. You think you might scream. Instead, you sigh and watch a lizard do push-ups on a sunlit stone. Even he looks more productive. And then just when you think your dignity couldn't take more damage, a messenger rushes past, brushing your shoulder. "Temple summons," he yells, dropping a bark scroll at your feet. You pick it up. It's your name, sort of, spelled wrong, but the message is clear. You're wanted at the temple. Again. Why? Who knows? Maybe it's another blessing. Maybe they want you to scrub statues. Maybe you've unknowingly violated an obscure barley ordinance. You drag your feet back toward the Ziggurat, mentally composing your next list of apologies. But as you reach the temple stairs, you're intercepted by a priest. "Not punishment," he says, reading your face. "A request from the high priest." You raise an eyebrow. He nods gravely. "You're to participate in a sacred ritual tonight. Moon offering. Special guests. They want extra bodies. Ow. Participants. You've been here less than 2 days, and now you're in the religious inner circle? Possibly as a symbolic sacrifice. Lovely. You follow him, wondering what you've gotten yourself into now. You're ushered into the temple's inner precinct with far more ceremony than your current hygiene level deserves. 2 priests flank you, each draped in robes stitched with celestial symbols, crescent moons, wavy lines, and something that looks suspiciously like a turnip. You walk in step with them, trying not to trip on the polished clay floor or knock over anything sacred, breakable, or both. You expected this part of the temple to be grand, and it is, but not in the way you imagined. The walls are intricately painted with fading scenes of gods mid-smite, their arms raised over terrified mortals and inexplicably plump birds. Incense wafts through the air in thick coals, smelling like a curious blend of cinnamon, pine sap, and possibly burned toast. It's supposed to evoke divine reverence. Instead, it mostly makes your nose itch. The high priest himself appears. He is tall, pale, and blessed with an unsettlingly symmetrical beard. He gestures you forward, not unkindly. "You've been chosen," he says in a voice so smooth it probably doubles as a lullaby. "Tonight, We honor Na, the moon god, and we require someone authentic. You blink. Authentic, someone common, he clarifies, smiling faintly. The gods like balance. We already have merchants, nobles, and a scribe's nephew. Now we need someone dusty. You are undeniably very dusty. He places a thin silver circlet on your head, light, cool, and completely absurd against your sweat-stiff tunic. Then he hands you a small basket filled with oddments, a blue stone, a ball of wool, a lump of clay shaped like a frog, and a single dried fig. You are to offer them on behalf of the earthbound. You are now officially the representative of the smelly, sore, and underappreciated. You rehearse the ritual briefly. Walk in a wide spiral around the altar, place each offering in sequence, then bow exactly 7 times while the chant echoes. You nod along as if this is the sort of thing you do daily. As night falls, the ziggurat's upper terrace glows with lamplight. The wine picks up, ruffling robes and whispering secrets through the temple corridors. The ceremony begins with horns, long, low notes that vibrate in your chest. Then come the drums, tapping a heartbeat rhythm as a procession of robed figures slowly ascends the steps. You're placed somewhere in the middle, just behind the man with a feathered hat and just ahead of a woman holding what looks like a ceremonial turnip. Historians still debate whether moon rituals were based on astronomical precision or just dramatic timing. Either way, it's working. The moon hangs full and bright overhead, casting a silver-blue light that dances on the limestone altar. You step forward when your turn comes, slowly, carefully. The crowd below watches in respectful silence. You can't tell if you're sweating from reverence or stage fright. Probably both. First, the stone. You place it gently on the altar and murmur a blessing you mostly make up on the spot. Something about enduring the tides of life. Second, the wool. You drape it next to the stone and whisper about warmth in cold nights, about community and the comfort of itchy blankets. Third, the frog. You pause. What are frogs sacred for again? Fertility, rain, general amphibious mystery? You settle on May. The earth remain most and lively. Last, the fig. You place it down with a sigh and say, for sweetness. When there's very little of it, you bow. Once, twice, 7 times. You stand, dizzy and slightly disoriented, just as the chanting crescendos behind you. For a brief moment, you feel it, a ripple. The kind of stillness that prickles your skin and makes you believe that maybe, just maybe, something heard you. Then the chanting stops, the drums go silent, the wind dies. A priest steps forward to mark your forehead with ash and oil. You resist the urge to sneeze. May Nana light your path, he intones. You nod solemnly. And then you're dismissed. No divine thunder. No transformation. No suddenly glowing tattoos. You're just you, slightly older. A bit more moonlit. As you descend the steps with the other participants, you notice that people make space for you now. Someone nods with mild respect. A child offers you a piece of honey bread, possibly mistaking you for a minor prophet. You take it. Why not? Later, you sit on a rooftop overlooking the city, chewing your sticky bread, watching the lamps flicker. In alleyways below, everything's quieter at this hour. Fewer arguments, fewer goats, just the rustle of reeds and the sound of distant lyres. You lie back on the cool clay tiles and let your limbs rest. The moon drifts across the sky like a silent watcher. It doesn't judge. It doesn't bless. It simply hangs there steadfast, ancient, and perhaps just a little smug. A breeze curls over you, soft and dry, carrying the scent of warm dust and cooling fire pits. You think to yourself, maybe the gods were listening, or maybe they were just amused. Morning arrives rudely. There's no sunrise fanfare, no gentle chorus of birdsong, just a chorus of shouting merchants arguing over the price of fish that smells like it lost hope yesterday. You roll over on the rooftop, your back cracking like old pottery, and try to remember if you dreamt anything significant. Probably something about frogs and moon bread. You'll chalk it up to divine influence and back pain. Today, you swear, will be easier, simpler. Maybe you'll find a shady corner and pretend to meditate. Maybe nobody will notice you. Maybe, oh, you there. Someone bellows from the street below. Of course, a stout man with an enormous mustache and a tunic embroidered with flower stains points directly at you. We're short a baker's helper. You've got 2 arms and presumably working fingers, down here. And just like that, You're a baker's apprentice. You clamber down the creaky ladder and land in the courtyard of a bakery already humming with heat and chaos. Enormous clay ovens belch warmth into the air. Loaves shaped like little turtles, fish, and at least one confused cow are stacked nearby. A girl hammers stale flatbread into breadcrumbs with a rock and doesn't even look up as you approach. Start by kneading, the baker says, handing you a mound of dough that feels like something between raw octopus and guilt. Don't overwater it this time. You nod. You have no memory of any previous time, but you suspect someone else didn't survive their baking internship. You plunge your hands into the dough. It squelches ominously. You knead. You fold. You regret. Dough ends up in your hair. Somehow, a pigeon lands on the edge of the counter and eyes you with judgment. The baker leans over. You're doing it wrong, he says flatly. I'm doing it with enthusiasm. You offer. He does not laugh. You're assigned to shaping duties instead. This involves rolling tiny loaves into vaguely human forms, supposedly for an upcoming festival. They're meant to represent divine figures. Yours look more like collapsed frogs and melted onions. The baker sighs and moves you again. Your next task. Delivery. You're handed a wide wooden tray filled with steaming, unevenly browned loaves and told to deliver them to the temple kitchens. You cradle the tray like it's a newborn, weaving through busy alleys full of carts, people, goats, and the occasional rogue dog. At one point, a child runs directly into your legs and causes 3 loaves to leap heroically into the dirt. You sigh, brush them off discreetly, and rearrange the tray so the priests won't notice. Divine forgiveness surely covers a bit of dust. At the temple kitchens, a sweaty man with a ladle accepts your offering and sniffs each loaf with the intensity of a man who's been betrayed by bread before. He grunts his approval and waves you off. Your reward. A slightly burnt roll and a handful of boiled chickpeas. You eat both in the shade of a nearby doorway, while listening to a heated discussion between 2 apprentices about whether barley or emmer makes the gods more satisfied. One of them cites a dream, the other cites his aunt. Neither concedes. Historians still argue whether divine food offerings were genuinely consumed by the gods or just recycled into clerical snacks. You lean heavily toward the snack theory. Based on how many priests you've seen with suspiciously full cheeks, your break is cut short by another assignment. Of course, this time, you're told to help prepare the ceremonial beer. Yes, beer. In Mesopotamia, it's not just a beverage. It's a religion-adjacent experience, a social glue, and if you're unlucky, a punishment in liquid form. The beer preparation area is behind the temple, near the fermentation pits. It smells like warm porridge left in a boot. Giant tubs of mashed barley bubble ominously. You're given a paddle and told to stir with reverence. You stir. Slowly, reverently, the mixture hisses at you. A priest supervising the process leans over and whispers, "It's got a personality today." Don't offend it. You nod. Understood. Later, a group of assistants pours the thick liquid into tall jugs, sealing them with wax and labeling them with tiny wedge marks denoting date, batch, and possibly mood. One jar reads friendly, maybe too friendly. By midday, you're allowed to leave. You stumble back through the marketplace, trailing flour, yeast, and an existential sense of having lived 6 lives in 3 hours. You think of visiting the public well to wash your face, but it's surrounded by women arguing over bucket priority, and one man claiming his water rights are backed by a celestial omen. You decide it's safer to remain dirty. Back in the alley near the bakery, the baker waves you down. Come here. Got something for you. You approach cautiously, bracing for another round of divine roll-sculpting. Instead, he hands you a round, neatly baked loaf. Best one from today. You earned it. Sort of. You smile, genuinely touched. Thanks. Just don't come back tomorrow, he adds. Fair. You carry your precious loaf like a trophy. You pass a group of children drawing in the dust with sticks, a woman selling bitter herbs, and a man loudly trying to convince strangers that his chicken has prophetic abilities. You believe him more than you want to. You return to your rooftop, perch in your usual spot, and tear into the bread. It's soft, warm, and doesn't taste like canal water. Miraculous. As you chew, the breeze picks up again, scattering dry leaves and carrying the faint scent of incense and overcooked onions. You watch a pair of hawks circle lazily overhead, unconcerned with your small victories, and for a moment, just a moment, you feel almost settled. Then someone shouts about a tax collector being spotted near the grain stores. You duck, Because in Mesopotamia, rest is sacred and always temporary. The tax collector arrives with all the subtlety of a thunderstorm made entirely of paperwork and barley dust. He's dressed in linen robes that are just a little too clean and carries a wax tablet under one arm like it's a weapon. Behind him trail two assistants, young, smug, and holding what can only be described as enforcement sticks. They're not clubs, technically, but you have no doubt they could club quite effectively if the situation demanded it. Naturally, the first person the collector spots is you. You try to look invisible. You attempt the age-old Mesopotamian defense of walking in the other direction while whistling. It fails. You there, the collector calls, pointing a stylus like a blade. You owe back labor. Your brain sputters. I did canal work, and I baked. I stirred beer reverently. He consults his tablet with exaggerated slowness, not properly recorded. Also, you missed your barley tithe. I have no barley. You protest. I don't even have full sandals. He narrows his eyes, then perhaps a substitute tithe. This is not encouraging. You're marched to the assessment station, a rickety table under a stretched cloth awning, covered in measuring cords, clay tokens, and one faintly sticky abacus. You're asked what goods you could offer. You begin listing your assets: one worn tunic, a half-eaten loaf of bread, a single waxed fig seed you were saving for emotional support. The tax assistant scribbles diligently. We'll call that non-material assets, he mutters. You attempt to barter your way out. I know how to clean fish. Sort of. Do you possess fish? No. Then your skill is presently unproductive. He makes a note. Historians still argue whether the Mesopotamian tax system encouraged social cohesion or widespread despair. You feel firmly rooted in the despair camp as they issue your penalty: one additional day of labor to the city's central storeroom. Specifically, to help with inventory. You are becoming intimately familiar with jobs no one wants. You're led to a low building near the eastern gate. It smells like millet flour, mouse droppings, and bureaucratic dust. Inside, rows of jars, baskets, and amphorae on the wall stacked and labeled in cuneiform shorthand. A grumpy overseer named Harib greets you with a grunt and a string of sneezes. Allergies, he says, pointing at the dust like it's a personal enemy. He gives you a stick and a tally board. Your job: tap each container, call out what it holds, and mark it on the board. If the container's broken, count the contents and write a brief description of the damage, mood of the grains, and possible future weather impact. You assume he's joking. He is not. You begin the ritual of tapping and tallying. Tap. Barley. Smells alive. Tap. Fish paste. Mournful texture. Tap. Unknown. Possibly cursed. Tap. Dried figs. One half-eaten bite. Possibly me. The hours drag. The dust gets thicker. A mouse runs over your foe and doesn't even apologize. Midway through the day, you find a broken jar full of lentils and something distinctly fossilized. You hold it up to Harib, who peers at it and says, "Oh, old priest snack stash, don't touch it." He's still haunting this aisle. You move on. Later, while inspecting a crate of ceramic bowls, you spot a tiny inscription etched into one side. Don't trust the scribe. You raise an eyebrow. Is it a warning? A joke? A very specific grudge? You leave it alone. Eventually, Harib declares the inventory good enough, sneezes 3 times, and waves you out. As you stumble into the light, you realize the sun is beginning to dip again. Another day, another layer of clay dust on your soul. You wander toward the riverside for air. The banks of the canal are quieter in the evening, shimmering with sunset reflections and buzzing with sleepy flies. A few children skip stones. A fisherman naps beside his boat, reed hat over his face, string still dangling in the water. You sit down, legs in the grass, and close your eyes. The breeze carries the scent of damp earth and fish, fresher this time, somehow, and you let your breath slow. Across the water, someone is playing a reed flute. The notes are simple, soft, and full of longing, or maybe just boredom. Either way, it's nice. You spot an old woman balancing a basket on her head as she walks the narrow path along the canal, muttering to herself about stars and snails. You nod politely. She nods back, then says, "The river dreams of you." You blink. "Pardon." She just chuckles and walks away. You stay by the water until the sun finally slides behind the ziggurat and the sky turns smoky violet. You don't know what tomorrow will bring: more taxes, more goats, possibly a surprise ceremony involving sentinels, but for now, you're just grateful to sit and not be yelled at. Just when you think the evening might pass without incident, the omens arrive. Not full-on plagues or divine retribution, at least not yet, but the sky grows heavy and strange, as if the air itself is holding its breath. The birds fall silent. A dog begins howling near the city gate, and from somewhere in the temple district, you hear a long, slow drumbeat that wasn't scheduled. Someone murmurs, "Eclipse." You glance up, squinting. The sun's long gone, but the moon tonight, so bold and full just the evening before, is now slipping behind a shadow that grows steadily deeper. A reddish halo creeps across its face, turning it the color of old blood and suspicious lentil stew. You are officially in omen territory. Within minutes, panic begins to simmer. A few people run indoors, others gather in clumps, clutching amulets and whispering urgent prayers. One then starts spinning in a circle while chanting the names of ancient kings in reverse chronological order. It might be a protective spell, or just how he handles anxiety. You're caught in the middle of it, once again a bewildered bystander in a city that treats cosmic events like divine Yelp reviews. A priest assistant darts out from an alley, breathless and clutching a copper gong. The high priest requires witnesses. He blurts, for dream clarification. You don't even get a chance to object. He grabs your wrist and hauls you off. Now you're sitting in a smoky side chamber of the temple, surrounded by nervous apprentices and a goat who, you're told, is symbolic. The high priest paces in front of a low altar, muttering. 3 nights ago, he says, I dreamt of rain that turned to barley, then to teeth, then to scribes arguing underwater. You nod, because what else can you do? He whirls on you. Interpret it. You blink. Barley symbolizes sustenance, teeth could mean speech, or danger, or aging molars. Underwater, scribes suggests knowledge drowned, or very dramatic complaints. He pauses, acceptable. Add minor concern over seasonal planting and beware of fish theft. A scribe scribbles, someone produces a sheep liver. You flinch. It's dry, leathery, and carved with marks. Previous omen, they say still relevant. You try not to gag as a priest points out ridges and valleys with a bronze stylus. See here, this bend implies discord, possibly a marriage dispute, and here a curve of misfortune suggests someone will trip over a ceremonial broom. Historians still argue whether liver omens were symbolic or actually used to justify decisions already made. Based on this reading, you're leaning toward justification with flourish. You are then handed a lump of clay and told to mold what you saw in your own omen dream. You did not have an omen-dream. So you improvise. You sculpt something that vaguely resembles a moon, a fish, and a screaming scribe. You place it solemnly on the altar. Everyone nods in reverent confusion. The high priest pronounces the eclipse a warning against laziness and goat theft. A goat somewhere bleats, as if to acknowledge the charge. You are dismissed. Again. By now, the moon is nearly clear of the earth's shadow. People emerge cautiously from their homes, peering at the sky with the tentative hope of those who haven't been smote yet. Someone lights incense. Someone else yells, "See? Told you it was just the sky farting." You return to the edge of the city where the houses thin out and the fields begin. It's quiet here, peaceful, and the moon, restored to its usual gentle silver, feels less like a threat and more like a lullaby. You sit by a cluster of date palms, resting your head against the bark. Crickets chirp, a frog belches somewhere in the reeds. You finally begin to relax, until you hear rustling in the bushes. You freeze, then a long hiss. Two glowing eyes blink at you in the dark. Snake. You rise slowly, heart thudding. It slithers forward, unhurried, utterly confident in its position atop the food chain. You, on the other hand, are barefoot and holding nothing but a small bag of borrowed chickpeas. You back away, whispering, "You are sacred in some mythologies. You are wisdom incarnate. Please go be wise elsewhere." The snake pauses. Then, mercifully, slips away into the grass. You collapse onto the ground and mutter, "Never trust a full moon." Eventually, you stagger back into the city, threading through narrow alleys lit by flickering oil lamps. You pass a group of teenagers daring each other to enter the old well where a ghost allegedly sneezes once every new moon. You pass a baker swatting flies from tomorrow's dough. You pass a mural of a god that now seems to be smirking at you. You climb back to your rooftop. Your head hits the mat, your limbs sink into the cool clay beneath you, your eyes drift shut. A distant lyre strums, and somewhere, probably, a goat eats someone's tax record. You wake to the sound of shouting. Again, it's not panic this time, no eclipses or dream livers, but the familiar, everyday kind of Mesopotamian shouting. Two neighbors in a screaming match about laundry water runoff. One accuses the other of flooding his storeroom. The other claims the river spirit told her to do it. Neither shows signs of stopping. You roll over and sigh deeply into your mat. Welcome back. Your body aches in all the usual places: lower back, shoulders, pride, and your left eye is crusted shut with what you hope is sleep. You rub your face, sit up, and immediately knock over a pot someone left by your bedding. It was empty. Probably. You don't ask questions before breakfast. Speaking of breakfast, you need it. You dress in the same tunic you've worn for what feels like 3 weeks, give it a shake that releases a puff of dust, and head out toward the Euphrates in search of something edible, or at least drinkable. Your route takes you through the side alleys behind the market, a quieter stretch of city where potters and tanners work. You pass one woman sculpting a jar so thin-lipped it looks like it's judging you. Her apprentice waves at you with hands covered in gray slip. Want to learn, she calls. We need someone who doesn't cry when the clay collapses. Tempting. But you keep walking. You reach the riverbank just as the sky begins to warm to that sticky gold color that signals incoming heatstroke. You spot a group of washerwomen gathered at the edge of the canal, their tunics hiked up, beating linens against flat stones in rhythm like some strangely aggressive symphony. You decide to join them, not to help, heavens no, but because the water looks cleanish and you could use a rinse. You splash some over your face, startling a frog and possibly scaring away an entire colony of river lice. A girl nearby laughs. First wash of the week, first of the life, you mutter, scrubbing your arms with a handful of reeds. She shrugs. At least you didn't drop your tunic like my brother last week. He's not allowed here anymore. You nod wisely and back away before anyone hands you a wet sheet. As you dry your face with the least grimy edge of your tunic, a loud squawk makes you turn. A boa on the opposite bank is trying to wrestle a goose into a laundry basket. The goose is winning spectacularly. You head toward the school quarter, where the city's more literate citizens spend their mornings copying down myths, cataloging dreams, and occasionally dozing off mid-alphabet. You've been told someone there might trade lunch for assistance, specifically in organizing clay tablets, idate and deity, a task so tedious it borders on mystical. You arrive to find the main school courtyard buzzing with the usual dull hum of early day education. Small groups of students squat around scribes who chant letters and sing Sonacadian. One bored boy has ashed a cartoonish rendering of a god farting thunder into the corner of his practice tablet. The senior instructor, an elderly man with a permanent ink stain on his nose, waves you over. You have nimble fingers, he asks. Debatable, you reply. Good enough. Come. He ushers you into a side room where clay tablets are stacked precariously like ambitious pancakes. These need reorganizing. Myth, law, tax, dreams, sheep, in that order. You open your mouth to ask whether the dreams are about sheep or just alphabetized near them, but he's already gone. So you work. You sort, you stare at tiny wedge marks that all look suspiciously identical. You begin to notice subtle differences. A slightly wider wedge here, an extra diagonal there, a scribal flourish that might mean ox or possibly political commentary. One tablet catches your eye. It reads, dreamed of a snake in the city. Spoke with a human voice. Demanded figs. You decide not to dwell on that. Another tablet is a formal complaint filed by a man against his wife's cousin's neighbor, who allegedly cursed at his fig tree after a barley dispute. The document ends with the phrase, he denies cursing, but the figs do not lie. You whisper, may my figs always lie. As a reward for your efforts, or perhaps out of pity, the instructor gives you a barley cake the size of your hand and a lukewarm cup of fermented date drink. You consume both without complaint, even as the cake crumbles like soft rock and the drink makes your eyelid twitch. You spend a quiet hour helping a boy repair a cracked tablet with fresh clay and water. He thanks you by giving you a tiny figurine, shaped like a lion with human feet, for protection, he says. Or confusion. As the midday heat sets in, the school empties. Children scatter to nap in the shade. The instructors vanish mysteriously, likely to temple libraries or cool cellars. You remain, sitting beside a pile of unread tablets, wondering what knowledge will never be recovered because someone sneezed on the drying rack. You drift into a half-nap. The kind where your body forgets how to hold itself upright, and you briefly dream of a market stall that only sells screaming onions. You wake with a jerk and a sore neck. No one notices. Outside, the air is heavy and fragrant smoke from cooking fires, blooming reeds, and whatever that one family is grilling that always smells suspiciously like sandal. You stretch, pat your lion-footed charm for luck, and head off to find somewhere to rest your brain. You pass a mural being repaired, gods, clouds, and humans bowing in awkward proportions. A young artist scowls at a particularly unfortunate hand she's painted and mutters, "Why do elbows exist?" You do not have an answer. You wander back toward the rooftop, feet dusty, head heavy, a belly half full of questionable grain product, and despite everything the tax threats, the liver omens, the snake diplomacy, you realize you're beginning to know your way around. Sort of. You climb your rooftop steps with the sluggish grace of someone who has walked too far, learned too little, and possibly inhaled more clay dust than air. The sky shifting to late afternoon sunlight taking on that burnished bronze hue, casting long, syrupy shadows across the mudbrick walls and slanting roofs. Somewhere nearby, someone is playing a slow, meandering tune on a lyre. Like even the music is too tired to hurry. You lie down on your mat, arms flopped out like a stunned frog, and close your eyes. You're not asleep, not really, but your body certainly thinks you've died. And then of course there's shouting again. You've come to expect shouting in Mesopotamia. But this is a different tone, less neighborly grudge, more enthusiastic confusion. You sit up and look over the rooftop wall. Below, in the courtyard next to the baker's, a group of priests are unloading baskets and scrolls. One of them is wearing a headpiece that looks suspiciously like a dried melon rind. You know that look. It's feast day. You'd forgotten. That probably makes you guilty of something in a religious sense. The festival, according to a passing child who's chewing a fig leaf and barely willing to explain, is in honor of Ninkasi, the goddess of beer, Joe, and hangovers. You decide this is the closest thing Mesopotamia has to a public holiday, and your curiosity outweighs your caution. You follow the nose to the temple plaza, where the space has been transformed into a somewhat crooked but impressively ambitious festival ground. Reed mats are laid out, amphorae of beer have been stacked into wobbly pyramids, and every third person is carrying something either sacred, smelly, or both. You linger near the edge, watching as performers in painted masks act out a very confusing myth involving two farmers, a goat with divine dreams, and a clay pot that screams when dropped. The audience claps politely, though most of them are clearly just waiting for the beer. You spot a long table piled high with ceremonial bread, lentil paste, dates, and surprise more barley. You sidle up, attempting to look priestly, or at least like someone not actively being chased by tax enforcers. A temple worker stops you. Do you have an offering? You check your tunic, empty. Then, from your pocket, you pull the tiny lion-footed figurine the boy from school gave you. The temple worker eyes it, then shrugs. Close enough. You're in. You grab a palm leaf plate and cautiously accept one of each item. The bread is stale, the dates are sticky, and the lentil paste tastes like it's already digested once. But the beer? Not bad. It's thick, sour, and tastes faintly like wet bread, but it's cold, and you are very, very thirsty. As the feast continues, you find yourself sitting beside a potter who's already halfway through his third bowl of festival. Beer. You know, he says, elbowing you. Ninkasi once turned a man into a donkey for sneezing in her temple. You nod. Reasonable. He leans in. That's why I never sneeze in public anymore. He then sneezes into his beer. To dancers begin twirling in the square, tossing handfuls of flower petals and, inexplicably, onion skins. The crowd cheers. A man with a harp begins singing a ballad about a drunk priest and a missing loaf. It becomes an audience sing-along by the third verse. You notice a group of young scribes nearby debating whether the mythological goat in the earlier play actually symbolizes abundance, mischief, or an ancient tax loophole. One of them pulls out a small clay tablet and tries to recreate the goat's dream. It ends up looking like a loaf with legs. Historians still argue whether festivals like this were meant more for spiritual observance or social cohesion. Based on the number of people currently attempting to dance in sandals that have clearly seen better years, you're betting on the latter. As night falls, The fire pits are lit, the music softens. People begin telling stories, some sacred, some absurd, all slurred. You hear one woman describe how her cousin once kissed a fish blessed by a river priest and then grew a third eyebrow. Someone else describes a prophetic dream in which barley grains organized themselves into a message that read, "Pay your taxes." You make your way to the edge of the square, belly full, head pleasantly fuzzy, and settle onto a smooth stone bench. A group of children gather nearby, playing a clapping game that seems to involve shouting names of old kings and rhyming them with food. Sargon eats melon. They chant, Hammurabi eats stew. It doesn't skin well, but it's catchy. A temple attendant appears with a tray of small clay cups. "Final round," he says. "For dreams and divine clarity." You take one sip. It's a mix of beer and something herbal. Tastes like regret. You drink it anyway. The fires crackle. The air is thick with laughter, smoke, and roasted lentils. For the first time in days, no one is yelling about goats. No one is dragging you to a bureaucratic office. You're just here, alive, quiet, full, and just as you begin to feel something resembling peace, a young priest runs through the square, waving a scroll and yelling, "Has anyone seen the sacred duck?" You close your eyes. Of course there's a sacred duck. The sacred duck, it turns out, is not just a metaphor. It's a real duck. And, as someone breathless and wild-eyed informs the gathered crowd, it has escaped. This is not just any duck, the priest insists, pacing the temple square with dramatic flair. It's the oracle duck blessed under the moon of Ishtar, raised on holy grain, bathed thrice weekly in river water collected only during celestial conjunctions. The duck, apparently, is not impressed by its own resume. Someone near you mutters, "I saw it this morning eating someone's laundry." Panic spreads not because people are worried about the duck's safety, but because if it isn't found soon, the festival rituals might be invalidated, and that would mean redoing everything. Yes, including the onion-flinging dance. You try to slide quietly toward the exit, but a hand grabs your arm. You have quick feet and a common aura, says the same priest who made you deliver grain to the Ziggurat 2 days ago. Go find it. You open your mouth to protest, but it's already been decided. You are, once again, the city's favorite scapegoat, or in this case, scapeduck. Thus begins your sacred poultry retrieval quest. You start by retracing its last known whereabouts, the eastern alley near the baker's oven. The ground is peppered with small web footprints and breadcrumbs, suspicious breadcrumbs. You crouch and whisper, "Duck," in a tone that makes even the rats pause to observe your descent into madness. You pass a man painting clay figurines. He doesn't look up. "It went toward the potter's district," he says, dipping a brush. "Had a purposeful waddle." You jog in that direction, sandals slapping the cobbled mudstone. In the potter's yard, a duck-shaped smudge of clay rests on a drying slab. You suspect it's not the actual duck, though you do poke it just to be sure. Nope. Very much a sculpture. You begin to ask passers-by. A girl nods solemnly. "I saw the duck. It stole a fig." Another claims it blessed her cousin's goat, which may or may not be a euphemism. A street performer suggests the duck has ascended spiritually and is no longer bound by earthly movement. Eventually, you find a small bow with a sling over one shoulder and a suspiciously satisfied expression. "Duck," he says. "Oh yeah, that was mine." You blink. "The oracle duck is yours." "Well," he shrugs, "it was. I traded it to the fishmonger for a smoked carp." You groan. "Smoked carp it is." The fishmonger proves elusive, but his stall is not. There's a very clear trail of fish scales leading to a shaded corner of the market, where the sacred duck is perched, quite regally, atop an overturned amphora. It is mid-quack, flapping its wings at a cat who's wisely keeping its distance. The duck's head tilts toward you. It regards you coolly. You suddenly feel as though you're in the presence of a minor deity. A wet, feathered, faintly fish-scented deity. You inch forward, arms out. "Hello there, blessed waterfowl. Respected spirit of barley and beak." It quacks once. You take that as encouragement. With surprising grace, you lunge and miss. The duck flaps off, squawking indignantly, straight through a spice vendor's display. "Come in everywhere." People shriek. You chase it through clouds of coriander and powdered garlic, sneezing uncontrollably. It flies briefly, then lands squarely in a pot of pickled radishes. You seize the opportunity. You lift the dripping duck from the vat like a soggy relic. It's furious. "You're soggy. Everyone's watching. You raise it above your head and yell, "I have the duck." There is applause. Back at the temple square, you return the sacred duck to its handler, who sniffs and mutters something about unusual pickling aura. The high priest examines it closely. "Yes, this is our bird." The duck bites him. A moment of silence. Then, a cheer. The festival resumes in full swing. Apparently, a duck bite counts. It's divine approval. As reward, you're offered a seat of honor at the final feast, a low stool with a moderately clean cushion, set near the storytellers and far enough from the beer pit that you won't be doused. By accident, you accept, because why not? You've wrestled the gods' poultry today. As the firelight flickers and the air fills with the scent of roasted root vegetables and slightly scorched chickpeas, a storyteller rises to share the tale of the duck who knew too much. The crowd laughs, gasps, and nods at all the appropriate moments. You realize, somewhere around the middle, that the protagonist sounds familiar double quotes and the brave citizen, dressed in rags and the dust of 10 labors, did pursue the sacred duck through the market, guided only by dreams, instinct, and a nose for fish. People turn to look at you. You raise your bowl of lentils and accept your accidental fame. Later that night, as the last embers die down and most guests have collapsed where they sat, you find your rooftop again. The stars are sharp tonight, clear. There's no eclipse, no omens, just a soft sky full of ancient light. The sacred duck, from a nearby courtyard, quacks once. You smile. You may not be rich, or rested, or particularly clean, but you're the duck wrangler of your and that counts for something. You awaken the next morning to an odd sensation. No one is yelling at you. For the first time since your accidental arrival in ancient Mesopotamia, the world is if not quiet, at least not immediately threatening. No goat-related court summons, no sacred livestock on the loose, no oozing canal duty, or priests hauling you by the elbow toward something vaguely divine and almost certainly exhausting. You lie there, blinking up at the sky from your usual rooftop perch, marveling at the peaceful sounds, birds chirping, a distant lyre, someone below arguing gently about turnips, but in a tone that suggests resignation more than vengeance. You stretch. Everything cracks. Your spine sounds like someone snapping a reed. You sit up slowly, thinking perhaps today might be uneventful. But, of course, today is the day the dentist visits. Well, dentist is a strong word. More accurately, a tooth man. A wandering specialist armed with herbal poultices, heated copper wires, and what looks suspiciously like a fish hook. He sets up shop near the temple courtyard, announcing his services with a series of loud clinks and an enthusiastic assistant holding a basket of molars. You overhear a potter's apprentice mutter, "Better lose the tooth naturally." You wander closer out of morbid curiosity and poor self-preservation instincts. The tooth man, a lanky fellow with a stained tunic and a collection of sharpened twigs tucked behind his ear, spots you and grins. "You there," he says. You've caught the look of someone with a tight jaw and spiritual build-up in the gums. You instinctively cover your mouth. "No need to be shy," he adds. "We offer reed rinses, ash powder polishes, and for the brave, the fire pick." That sounds very illegal. You politely decline and start backing away when a matron nearby grabs your elbow. "Don't be foolish," she says. "He cleaned my cousin's teeth so well she lost her ability to gossip for 3 days. That actually sounds promising." You reluctantly sit on a low stool and open your mouth, while the toothman examines your molars with the concentration of someone reading prophecy. He says. "These lower ones are suspicious. They dream of escape." "What? Too late. Open wider." He sprinkles something in your mouth that tastes like burnt onions and regret. Then he holds up a slender heated rod and says, "Don't worry. If it hurts, that means it's working." You nearly bite him. After some scraping, humming, and a short incantation possibly made up on the spot, he steps back and proclaims you spiritually realigned and dentally upright. You are handed a reed tube for rinsing and a boiled fig as a consolation prize. You stagger away, mouth numb, one eyebrow twitching slightly. You wander aimlessly toward the outskirts of the city, seeking cool air and a place to mentally recover. The city gates are open now, and the farms just beyond the walls buzz with activity. You pass barley fields, date ponds, and a group of shepherds arguing with a cow who clearly thinks she's a goat. A young beau offers you a seat under a tamarisk tree and a warm handful of dried chickpeas. "You look recently cursed," he says helpfully. You munch slowly. "I saw a dentist." "Ah, Same thing. He points toward the hills in the distance. That's where the old ice house was, he adds casually. Back before the river moved. You squint. You had ice, he nods. Sometimes, in the deepest storerooms. Only for the really important people, or the really sweaty priests. Historians still debate whether true ice storage existed this far south in Mesopotamia, or if such accounts are poetic exaggerations. The boy simply shrugs and tosses another chickpea into his mouth. Cold or not, the priests always said it cured food rot. You thank him, stretch your legs, and begin walking back toward the city. On the way, you're stopped by a woman selling charms made of copper and carved bone. She insists one of them will protect you from tooth curses, jealous goats, and poorly stored lentils. It's shaped like a beetle. You buy it. By the time you return to the temple square, the sun is high, the air is thick with the scent of roasted garlic and ambition, and a new drama is unfolding. A sacred jar has cracked. It's not just any jar. It was used in moon rituals, has special barley, and according to a very nervous novice was probably blessed by 7 wines and 1 mildly intoxicated scribe. The crack, unfortunately, is significant right down the side. Rumors swirl. Instantly. Was it cursed? Was it dropped? Was it a test from the gods? You're pulled into the debate despite your protestations. Someone says you have experience with divine poultry, and thus are qualified to comment on sacred damage. You examine the jar. You say, it looks ... cracked. Everyone nods, deeply impressed. The high priest thanks you, declares the jar now doubly sacred due to its symbolic vulnerability, and orders that it be displayed upside down. Problem solved. As evening draws near, you visit the bakery, where the flour bow saves you a half loaf in exchange for a short retelling of the sacred duck incident. It's become a local legend now. They've named a flatbread after it, crispy on the outside, mysterious in the middle. You eat slowly by the river, where the stars begin to shimmer. A fish jumps, a child nearby sings a lullaby about a lazy god and a stolen honey pot. You feel the coolness seep into your bones. Your beetle charm swings lightly from your wrist. You may not have found purpose here, or peace, or shoes that fit, but you are no longer surprised by snakes, taxes, or dentists, and that, in Mesopotamia, is growth. You wake the next day to what sounds like drums. Not celebratory drums, not wedding drums. These are someone has made a very bad decision, and now the city has to deal with the drums. You sit up slowly, brush a date pit out of your hair, and scan the skyline, smoke rising from the direction of the southern market. Of course something's on fire. You climb down from your rooftop and follow the stream of shouting, half-dressed citizens, some carrying water jars, others just shouting conflicting advice into the air. As you round the corner into the main thoroughfare, the smell hits you. Burning cloth, singed barley, and the unmistakable tang of panic. The flax tent district is in full chaos. A merchant is screaming about his priceless imported dyes. Another is attempting to salvage exactly one sandal from a stall that is, frankly, more ash than architecture. One man stands perfectly still, holding a large empty pot and quietly whispering, "It was a cooking fire. It was a cooking fire." You're handed a bucket by a teenager who looks like he's been waiting for this moment his whole life. Line up, he barks, gesturing wildly. River water, north side. You're now part of a hastily formed bucket chain, sloshing brackish canal water onto flames that hiss like angry cats. Your bucket has a hole in it. You pretend not to notice. In the middle of the chaos, the high priest is standing on a crate, yelling something about divine purification and the importance of not building tents from cursed reeds. A scribe beside him is already composing a clay tablet titled Conflagration concerning the South Market and lessons therefrom. You pass to bucket, you wipe your face. You smell like damp smoke and barley paste. Welcome to another day of unwanted heroics. Eventually, the fire dies, mostly. A few tents are gone. One goat is lightly roasted, and someone's entire lentil stock is now tragic, bubbling sludge. Miraculously, no one's dead, though one man insists he had a spiritual experience while being briefly smoked like a fish. You stagger away from the wreckage and sit on an overturned clay jar. Your arms are jelly, your tunic is scorched, and your eyebrows may be gone. A passing elder claps you on the back. "Good work," he says, coughing. "We're holding a meeting soon, for city planning. You should come." You laugh hard. He's not joking. Later that day, You find yourself sitting in a shaded courtyard with 7 other citizens all recently traumatized staring at a hand-drawn map of the city etched into the dirt with a reed stick. A woman from the weaving quarter is shouting about fire breaks. A brewer insists that beer foam is a natural extinguisher and should be considered civic infrastructure. Your suggestion? Stop storing flammable oil next to ceremonial tents, and maybe designate a goat-free zone. You are voted temporary assistant to the Public Safety Subcommittee. You feel powerful and deeply tired. As the meeting disbands, you're approached by a man who introduces himself as Gullah, a part-time priest and full-time pessimistic astrologer. We should have seen this coming, he mutters. The moon was too smug last week, and the pigeons were flying unusually low. You nod politely. Anyway, he adds, we need someone to help chart the stars tonight. Bring snacks. You agree, mostly because you have no other plans, and the idea of watching the sky sounds marginally less dangerous than fire duty. By sunset, you're perched atop the Ziggurat again, your unofficial home away from roof. Gullah is arranging polished stones on a linen mat while chewing on something green and unpleasant. He hands you a wax tablet and points at the sky. If a star blinks too fast, note it. If one moves, scream. The stars emerge slowly, flickering into place like reluctant actors. The moon is back normal-sized, mostly innocent, and the air is cool. Quiet. You scribble marks, not knowing what they mean. Gullah hums to himself and occasionally curses a constellation named the Unhelpful Goat. A shooting star zips by. You point. Gullah gasps. That's either divine approval or a warning about flatbread shortages. You both agree to write it down just in case. As the hours stretch, more priests arrive. They bring snacks: dried plums, barley crisps, and one suspiciously chewy fig. Someone uncorks a clay bottle labeled "not beer" in very shaky writing. It is, in fact, extremely beer. The stargazing becomes less academic. Someone suggests a game where each person must name a constellation based on their current mood. You go first. You gesture toward a crooked cluster of stars. That's the overworked scribe who forgot lunch. Laughter. The brewer points to a dim patch of sky. That's the hole in my roof that lets in ghosts. Gullah points to the brightest one and sighs. That's the star I told my wife I'd name after her before she ran off with a potter. Silence. Someone pats his back. You offer him a barley crisp. He accepts. Eventually, you lie back against the warm stone of the Ziggurat, the sky above stretching white and endless. You can feel the city below, its fires, its chaos, its ducks and taxes and accidental civic appointments, but up here, it's quiet. It feels ancient, eternal. You close your eyes for a moment, and when you open them, the stars have shifted. Gullah leans in. That one just moved. You squint. That's a beetle, he sighs. Every time. You smile, not because things are easier now, not because you understand Mesopotamia any more than you did yesterday, but because somehow, through fire and stars and sacred poultry, you're still here, still surviving. Mostly. By morning, the rooftop stargazing crew has either gone home, passed out, or decided to live permanently on the Ziggurat in protest of gravity. You, for reasons even you don't understand, are still up there lying on warm stone, stiff from sleep, and coated in a fine nesting of roasted chickpea crumbs. You stretch, sit up, and realize with dread that today's inventory day. Again. At some point last week, you agreed foolishly, optimistically, to help a junior scribe catalog the temple storerooms. You remember doing this already, but apparently Mesopotamian bureaucracy regenerates like a wounded salamander, stronger, more confusing, and determined to swallow you whole. So you descend, slowly. The city is already buzzing with motion. Someone's herding chickens in a way that can only be described as counterproductive. A group of men are debating whether river reeds are best harvested during dreams or daylight. A potter is yelling about someone stealing her sacred kill goat again. You trudge through the square and reach the storerooms just as the junior scribe, whom you mentally call paper cut enthusiast, greets you with an urgent scroll and a complete lack of eye contact. Start here, he says, pointing to a chamber that smells like sadness and vinegar. Inside are hundreds, yes, hundreds of sealed jars. Some labeled, many not. You're given a stylus and told to mark any jars with suspicious smells, off-color seepage, or angry noses. You ask him to define angry, he says. You'll know. You begin. Jar 1. Barley, normal, dusty, unimaginative. Jar 2. Dried garlic. Aggressively aromatic. You sneeze. Jar 3. Cracked lid. Questionable liquid. Faint hissing noise. You back away. By mid-morning, you've tallied 37 acceptable jars, 10 cursed or questionable vessels, and 1 mystery bundle labeled for emergencies and small weddings. You briefly consider running away, but the scribe returns, holding a second list. There's been a misplacement, he says. Several jars marked for trade were sent to the priestly kitchens. We must recover them. Quietly, you are now on a black market rescue mission for misrouted barley paste. You sneak into the temple kitchens, disguised as, well, yourself. No one questions you. You suspect your reputation now hovers somewhere between weirdly useful and harmless village omen. Inside the kitchens, the heat is tremendous. Fires roaring clay hearths. Cooks shout over sizzling pots. Someone is furiously dicing leeks or reciting a hymn to Enki. You spot a pile of sealed jars in the corner, marked with faint wedge symbols. You pretend to inspect a nearby spice jar, then edge closer. You reach out. Hey. Someone shouts. You freeze. Then miraculously it's not about you. A priest has slipped on a puddle of soup and is now loudly accusing a pot of betrayal. You take advantage of the distraction to grab the jars, stack them in your arms, and exit with the unearned confidence of a tax official during festival season. You return to the scribe, hand him the reclaimed goods, and collapse onto a sack of lentils. Well done, he says flatly, already scratching updates into a tablet. Your reward? A short lecture on wedge alignment and a complimentary scoop of barley. You eat it dry. Like sadness granola. At midday, the temple bell rings twice. That means one thing. Divination time. You've seen this ritual before. It involves dream interpreters, goat bones, and a lot of nodding. You sit near the back of the plaza, half curious, half asleep. A priestess steps forward with a clay tablet. Last night, she says dramatically, a merchant dreamt he was a date palm being picked by a fish. The crowd murmurs. Someone in the front row gasps. The interpretation. The merchant's goods will be stolen unless he sacrifices a gore. He does not look pleased. Another dream follows. A child dreamt of a 3-legged frog singing in the rain. The scribe nods solemnly. A omen of mixed blessings, likely snack-related. Historians still argue whether these public interpretations shape policy or simply served as communal entertainment. Today, it's mostly entertainment. Someone nearby bets 3 chickpeas that the next dream involves falling off a ziggurat. They lose. It involves a very angry pigeon instead. You slip away from the crowd and find yourself wandering toward the artisan quarter. The smell of wet clay and powdered pigments fills the air. You watch as painters touch up temple murals, gold leaf glinting in the sun. Tiny brushstrokes adding depth to mythical beasts that look half lion, half confused donkey. One artist glances at you. Want to help? You hesitate. Then nod. He hands you a brush. Paint over this crack, he says, pointing to a spot on a god's toe. Make it look like intention. You do your best. It looks vaguely intentional. The artist nods. Good. Now don't touch anything else. You help clean brushes, grind pigments, and sweep up broken tiles. It's oddly peaceful. No yelling, no goats, no fermenting anything. By the time the sun starts to dip, your fingers are stained red and blue, and your thoughts are oddly calm. You head back to your rooftop, carrying a scrap of painted clay. The artist gave you a tiny swirl of gold and green from the hem of a sky god's robe. You earned it, he'd said. Dearly, you lie on your mat, staring at the sky. Stars blink on, one by one. The air is cooler now, calmer. You close your eyes. Tomorrow will come, with its chaos, its errands, its surprises. But tonight, you sleep like a sacred duck in a barley basket. You awaken before dawn, not to shouting, or fire, or rogue livestock, but to a soft tapping on the rooftop stones. You sit up, bleary-eyed, and find a temple runner standing over you, holding a tightly wrapped scroll like it might explode if jostled. You've been summoned, he says flatly. To what? You ask, instantly suspicious. He shrugs. Something ceremonial, or clerical, or clay-related. Of course it is. You rub your face, shake the dust from your tunic, and follow him through still sleepy alleyways. The sky is just beginning to glow pink at the edges, and the air is quiet except for the distant clatter of someone already arguing with a goat. The runner leads you to the central temple atrium, where a group of very serious-looking priests are gathered around a large, rectangular stone slab. On it rests a collection of tools, styluses, brushes, carving picks, and one curious object that looks like a polished shell on a stick. You've been chosen, says the head priest, to assist with a monument inscription. You glance around. Surely there's been a mistake. You're not a scribe. You're not even particularly legible most days. We've heard, he continues, of your unconventional observational skills. You decide not to ask what that means. The task: to help carve and review a public inscription detailing recent civic events, particularly the fire, the moon ritual, and, yes, the sacred duck recovery. You are now part of Mesopotamian PR. They hand you a rough clay draft of the inscription. It reads, "In the year of the minor eclipse and the smiting of the turnip stalls, brave citizens preserved harmony through duck restoration, barley water, and communal singing." You blink. That's accurate-ish. Embellishment is sacred, says the priest. So you work. You spend hours beside a trained scribe, smoothing wet clay, etching wedge after wedge into the commemorative tablet. You suggest small changes like not using the phrase molten goat panic, and are surprisingly thanked for your editorial insight. It's dusty, repetitive work, but somehow comforting. Like everything else in this place, it's about shaping chaos into something solid, neat lines, durable stories, the illusion of control, baked in clay. Historians still argue whether these civic records were meant to document or distract. Either way, this one now features you, unnamed but imply, under the title Unlikely Assistant. After the carving, the tablet is lifted carefully, reverently, and carried to the outer wall of the temple, where it's slid into a niche and sealed with plaster. A child nearby reads aloud the final line, "And thus, the city endured by duck, by flame, by barley." You can't argue with that. The priest gives you a small token of thanks, a polished stone bead, deep green and cool to the touch. For clarity, he says, or at least distraction. You wear it around your neck, mostly because it's the cleanest thing you own. The rest of the morning is yours. You take a walk through the scribe's garden, a rare quiet space filled with fig trees, date palms, and clay planters etched with verses. You sit beneath a crooked pomegranate tree and watch a cat stalk something invisible with wild purpose. A scribe sits nearby, mumbling as he translates an old dream record. "What do you make of the sky turned to rote and wrapped the goat in a kiss?" he asks. You shrug. "Sounds like a Tuesday." He chuckles and scribbles it down. Later, you're dragged into an impromptu parade. Yes, a parade. Apparently, one of the wealthier families has just completed construction of a new grain silo, and as per tradition, they're celebrating by giving out free bread and hiring two musicians and one juggler with questionable depth perception. You get caught in the procession, handed a loaf, and asked to dance a little, which you interpret as swaying without falling over. It counts. The juggler drops a fig, catches it on his foot, and is immediately hired for a festival. A young woman dressed in a robe to find for the street hands you a slice of honey cake. "You're the duck person, right?" she asks. You nod wearily. "Yes," she smiles. "My cousin bet it wasn't real. He owes me to lentils." You're becoming folklore. After the parade, you take refuge in a small shrine near the city's edge. Inside is a statue of a local healing deity, a quiet god with a face like a loaf and eyes like calm puddles. Someone has placed a painted egg at its base. Someone else has left an apology scratched onto a tablet fragment. You sit for a while, not praying exactly, just existing, watching the way dust drifts in the beams of light, listening to your own breath, and the echo of a city that somehow hasn't collapsed under its own absurdity. When you leave, the air is turning gold. Evening again. You return to your rooftop with a bundle of leftover flatbread, your green bead charm, and a vague sense of having contributed to something larger than yourself, even if it was just a story baked into a wall. You eat, you exhale, you let the day unspool behind your eyes like a scroll you don't need to read again. And just before sleep takes you, you hear a distant quack. You smile. Some things never change. Tonight, the air is thick and velvet soft, draped over the rooftops like an old blanket. There's no shouting, no festivals, no fires. Just the gentle hum of clay cooling in the ovens and the rustle of palm leaves whispering lullabies to no one in particular. You lie on your rooftop mat, arms folded behind your head, staring at the Mesopotamian stars with the blank exhaustion of someone who has wrestled ducks, evaded taxes, cleaned sacred grain jars, and been spiritually scoured by a man with a heated toothpick. It's the final night. Not because of any ceremony, not because of any celestial decree, just because your muscles have reached a secret agreement with your bones to stop cooperating unless bribed with sleep and silence. A nearby house leaks the murmur of conversation, someone recounting a cousin's dream about being turned into a pomegranate. The response is a laugh and the clinking of pottery. The low, a dog sighs, or real, proper sigh. Even the animals are tired of all this. You sit up for one last look. The city spreads out before you, a patchwork of baked brick, bent reeds, leaning walls, and determined people. It shouldn't work, but somehow, it does. Somehow, this dusty, nosy, bowling clay bowl of a place manages to grow food, spin stories, raise gods, and find new ways to interpret the same dreams night after night. And you've survived it, barely. You've learned to dodge canal duty, to negotiate with children selling haunted figs, to distinguish between a sacred goose and a very confident regular goose. You've witnessed a moon ceremony, rebuilt public records, and been given offerings by a man who once claimed your elbow reminded him of a constellation. You've been nobody, and then a legend, and then nobody again. And somehow, that feels like the right arc. As you lie back, a breeze rolls in from the river, cool, earthy, and just damp enough to stick to your cheeks. The stars above blink slowly, without judgment. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays 3 slow notes before giving up. You think, if I make it to morning without being recruited by another priest, it will be a victory. Then you think, but maybe I'll miss it. Not the heat, not the goose chases, but the rhythm of it all, the way the city breathes and haggles and prays and sweats and dances with dust in its hair. The way the Ziggurat watches over everything like a tired older sibling. The way even a nobody like you was given a name in someone's festival song. The way they called you the one who carried the duck. You smile, you close your eyes, and now the wind down begins, and so here you are, letting your breath ease into the gentle cadence of a city that, for all its heat and nose and divine paperwork, somehow lulled you into belonging. The air is cooler now, the rooftops still radiate the sun's memory, but the breeze brushes lightly across your face, careful, slow, almost apologetic for the day that came before. Your limbs grow heavier, sinking into the mat beneath you. The weight of everything, laughter, errands, accidents, all the things you didn't understand starts to melt away, like chalk in rain. Even the sounds are quieter. No footsteps, no clanging pots, just the occasional flap of a nightbird's wings and the soft murmur of a reed curtain shifting in the wind. Your thoughts drift gently, untethered. A floating clay jar, a duck-shaped bread roll, the memory of moonlight on your fingertips as you placed a blue stone on an altar, the memory of someone calling your name, not urgently, not demandingly, just calling it because it belonged to you. The stars above shine patiently, as they did thousands of years ago, as they still do now. And somewhere, maybe on another rooftop, or under another sky, someone else is drifting off, wondering how they got here, wondering what the gods think of dreams and bread, and wandering nobodies who try very hard not to offend the sacred poultry. But tonight, none of that matters. You're safe. You're still. And Mesopotamia is finally quiet.